Make your marks.
You're listening to the Pullbuoy podcast.
Hello, welcome back to the Pullbuoy podcast. Steve here, and on this episode, we're doing something a bit different because we're not talking about swimming. We're giving ourselves a pat on the back and being self-indulgent for 20 minutes. I've got my usual co-hosts, Bob and Katie, with me. Good evening to you both.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Now, we are, as I say, being self-indulgent because we have an anniversary coming up. And if you were into podcasts in 2013, on the 28th of July 2013, if you'd pointed your podcast player at pullbuoy.co.uk, you would have heard this.
Make your marks.
So, day one at the World Championships in Barcelona, and we've already had 10 British swimmers in action in the pool there at the Palau Sant Jordi.
So there we go. That was the first ever podcast that the three of us did.
Can he sound young?
I take that as a compliment, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. It was supposed to be. Yeah.
So that was the introduction to number one of our series of podcasts that we started in 2013 when the three of us teamed up to cover the World Championships that took place in Barcelona that year. I successfully managed to start by not saying what you were listening to or who I was, but it all went uphill from there. So the big question is, how do you two remember that first week 10 years ago? Bob, let's start with you.
Well, I remember not being there, Steve, for a start. That was the first World Championship. It was our first major swimming event I hadn't done for about 15 years, as I'd left the BBC at that point. I left the BBC in 2012. So my last swimming gig for BBC Radio was the Olympics in London, 2012. 2013, I was still working for the BBC on the diving, so I was in Salford and not in Barcelona, sadly. So I was watching from afar, and actually, like all three of us, I think, getting more and more downhearted and downcast as the week went on, because it was not the greatest of weeks for British swimming.
It wasn't. Well, I'm sure we'll delve into that in more detail in a minute. Katie, how did you feel about, you're not a professional broadcaster like Bob. How did you feel about some random person you'd met on the internet, met once in real life, sort of messaging you and saying, "Hey, I'm doing a podcast. What do you reckon?"
You make it sound very seedy. I remember being really nervous. I don't actually know how on earth I did it, particularly as we did it every night, because I just started a job that basically never let me go home. So I have no idea at all how I managed to join you guys for a podcast every night when we got increasingly more depressed, as Bob said, at the lack of medals. But I do remember being quite nervous. I know I can be pretty confident that I was a swimming geek, but never quite knew if I'd have anything to say at the right moment.
Well, it all, I've listened back as part of research for this. I've listened back to the entire week of podcasts, and I have to say you had plenty to say, so there was no issue there at all. Bob, you picked up that you'd finished with the BBC the year before for swimming, at least. And one thing I wanted to ask you, and you may have a view on this, is I know we'd exchanged messages, and we'd met a couple of times, and we'd exchanged messages in the lead up, thinking, well, wouldn't it be good to try and do something like that without really having a firm idea before we settled on this. But I wondered if, when you agreed to do it, it gave you a chance to be maybe a bit more opinionated, perhaps, than you might have been able to be on the BBC radio commentary, because certainly, you're a bit more strident than people who'd heard you on 5 Live would have known.
Yeah, because you have to very much I wasn't a correspondent, but I was a swimming reporter for the BBC. So you have to remain as neutral as you can. And now I was out of the BBC bubble to a certain extent. I was on diving, but not on swimming. So I was able to give a more maybe well-rounded opinion, maybe a better overall opinion of what I was seeing in the pool. And we come off the back of, let's be honest, a very disappointing 2012. We'd gone with high expectations, lots of medal prospects in 2012, or so we thought. We came out with just Becky and with Michael Jameson. So we were definitely going through that rebuilding phase. And I still think I felt a bit maybe wounded or scarred a bit by 2012. And maybe that was my first chance to really vent, I suppose, because I didn't want to do it during the course of the Olympics.
Yeah, I think that comes across, I think, at certain times during that first week. But we've kind of alluded to it already, because it was depressing as the week went on. We started with high hopes, as you heard in that little intro I just played back from the start of that week, and progressively things kind of got worse, if you like. And it was only the last day that we picked up the solitary British medal that Fran Halsall rescued the meet for Britain by picking up bronze in the 50 free. Katie, do you remember, much about that week? All the near misses. We had so many fourth places, so many people finishing ninth and not making finals. It was disappointing, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there were quite a few near misses in London, and you sort of hope that the following year you're going to turn those fourths into thirds, and there were chances, weren't there? There were a lot of chances, and just every single time we seemed to miss them. And I think it probably felt, we didn't really want to put out a depressing podcast. We wanted to have lots to be excited about and chat about. So scrabbling around for that, because we were doing them every night as well. You couldn't really gloss over the fact that it was a pretty difficult meet for GB. Still quite fun to do, but I think increasingly difficult to sound upbeat and positive without the results to back it up.
And it's quite an interesting games, wasn't it? Or interesting championships on the back of the Olympics. So there were a lot of swimmers who did dominance in not just one event, but in 2 or 3 events. In that, there was we obviously saw not Michael at the back of Michael Phelps because he came back later on, but at that stage Michael Phelps wasn't in the picture, and other people were stepping up to the plate. And we had obviously the real emergence of Katie Ledecky after what she'd done the year before.
Yeah, no, she was a big star that week. World records, 1500s and 800 free. She won the 400 as well. No, yeah. That was a real emergence as a force.
How is she still doing it? How is she still doing that 10 years on? She's a distance swimmer. How does she still have shoulders? She's amazing, isn't she?
Well, she is, but unfortunately, from her point of view, there's somebody is a bit better at the 400 than she is right now.
Yeah, but no one's anywhere near on the 8 or the 15 at the moment.
We'll find it.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Now, we talked about near misses there, and someone who unfortunately had a number of near misses that week was Jazz Carlin. She was 4th in the 400 on the first day, and then 9th in the 800 heats, and 9th in the 1500 meter heats. And Katie, this is where you said something, that I found quite interesting, because it was quite prescient, about what might happen to Jazz afterwards. So I'm going to share this little clip. Katie, try not to shudder too much, because I'm sure you will. But just have a listen to this.
But knowing Jazz, I don't think it'll happen again. I don't think the same thing will happen in a major event again, because she's very good at learning where things have gone wrong, and she will change things, and she will be more determined.
So you swam with Jazz on teams, and you obviously knew her. But was that, were you confident that she would change things, or was that just, that optimism coming through? Because if you look at what happened to her career, the years afterwards, she'd been ill. In 2012, 2013, she had those disappointments. 2014, Commonwealth champion, European champion. 2015, world bronze. 2016, 2 Olympic silvers, and then obviously she stepped away from the pool. So whatever she took from 2013, you were quite right. It didn't happen again.
I have no recollection of saying that, but no, I don't think that was something I was just sort of saying for the podcast. I think she already had that reputation, didn't she, from Bud, of being the pit bull and sort of getting stuck into things and getting the best out of any situation. And I think I'd seen her on the world's team in 2009 in Rome, and that I think she won that relay medal as part of the 4x2, and that was kind of the first big showing from Jazz, and she's so belonged there. So I don't feel at all surprised at what she went on to do. That might be with the benefit of hindsight, knowing that she went on to do that. But I feel justified in saying, I knew that this was coming. Her success was coming. Also, I'd like to never listen back to myself ever again. Thank you very much.
That can be arranged. Okay. No, I think it was just interesting because you listen to these things with a different perspective, obviously, with time and knowing what happened since. And in a similar vein, 2 of the swimmers, not British, that we spoke a lot about that week. We've touched on Katie Ledecky's performance, but 2 others that we spoke about a lot that week were Yulia Efimova and Sun Yang, who both had really, really great championships. I think
a surprise.
With the benefit of hindsight, we may have a different view on them, Bob.
Well, yeah, I just looking back at the results. Sun Yang won the 400 by over 3 seconds, 3:41 compared to Hagino's 3:44. 800 was closer, although what strikes me about that championships is names I've forgotten all about. Michael McBroom. Do you remember Michael McBroom? He finished behind
remember the name.
Yeah, in the 800. Do you know whatever happened to Michael McBroom after that? And it was quite tight actually in the 1500. Ryan Cochran of Canada got very close to Sun Yang, and a man who's still very much around and was setting a national record that year, Gregorio Paltrinieri, was the bronze medalist in the 1500. And of course, he'll be doing the open water and the 1500 in Fukuoka in a couple of weeks' time.
Another one where you question how his shoulders have held up for 10 years doing that. But I've forgotten all about him coming onto the scene. So good. And Sun, whatever we may think of him now, he split a 143.1 on their 4x2 as well. So he was quite remarkable that week for whatever reason. And I think I shall leave it there.
I do remember watching him in his early success and thinking, and I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere where he'd done something absolutely incredible, and he was shaking hands with some of the officials on poolside, and I just remember being like, what a great guy, like he's so like respectful and what a great guy. And I'm not sure I'd have quite the same view these days.
Was that not his last 100, the Worlds in 2011, where he came back in a ridiculous last 100? Wasn't that what we were talking?
It might have been. Did he break if he broke, I feel like he broke some insane record on that swim, and that was why kind of everyone was around.
I think that's when he broke the 15 world record, Hackett's 15 world record.
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Well, let's move on. Let's bring ourselves back round to the British team. Now, we've said a number of times that we got fairly downhearted that week, and we did speak about every single British performance that took place, and that did leave us saying, or I remember listening to it back, I did say I'm sure they'll be disappointed with that a lot of times, but Britain took a team of 30, I think it was, to those championships. Now, a little quiz for you. 2 of those 30 are also going to Fukuoka in a couple of weeks' time. Can you guess which 2 they are?
I know it's not, so I've got to work through who it could be. Ben Proud?
Ben Proud, that's one. Ben Proud's one, yeah.
I was going with James Wilby, but
No,
he wasn't on the team at that stage.
Would you like me to
Female?
Pardon?
Female?
No, another chap.
A male. Okay.
Shall I put you out of your misery?
Not Dan Jervis. He wasn't around then.
I want to get it.
Okay, working with
Duncan, no, he would have been about 12. James Guy.
Yes,
of course it would be.
So here we are. Here we are. Day 1 of 2013. Have a listen.
The positive story, obviously, is the form of James Guy. The other teenager from Britain who was on action today, Ben Proud, he swam the 50 fly.
So there we go. They were there. We've covered their entire senior international swimming careers on this podcast because they made their debuts in Barcelona. And in fairness, James in particular was one of the highlights that week.
He made the final of the 400.
He was 5th in the 400, and then he swam some great swims in the 4x2, as obviously we know him for. And I know Bob, you got a little bit of stick because you were the founder member of the James Guy fan club, self-appointed by the end of the week.
Well, yeah, kind of. And of course, since then, he and me and his dad had some disagreements about how he's been used at Olympics in terms of the relays and the individuals and stuff like that. But no, I think what I liked about him was the kind of his jib, as we've seen all the way through his 10 years at international level, is that he always goes for broke. He's always in there. He's never going to be a 90% or a 95% swimmer. He's going to be a 100% swimmer every time, like Duncan Scott. They're cut from the same kind of cloth. And I think, I just saw the emergence of somebody who's turned out to be a very, very good swimmer. And ultimately, and I think that unfortunately from my point of view, his legacy is going to be what a great relay swimmer, and not got the individual medals I think he should have got over the years.
You did pick a good horse to back, even if we might have taken the mick.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'll see a swimmer come through who then doesn't translate their performances. I think I was quite early on Michael Jameson, to be honest, obviously before the podcast days. But when I saw Michael come through, because we had so many breaststrokers to choose from, and I think I went with him because I was so impressed by how good his stroke was. Aesthetically, the best breaststroke I think I'd ever seen at that stage.
No, and I think, yeah, I'm pulling your leg because he was one of the high points, if not the high point, after Fran for Britain that week, and he's been incredible ever since, hasn't he? You know, if you look at his career, he's been an unbelievable servant for British swimming. So yeah, I think you were on the money there, Bob. However much we might.
Interesting how he's changed his events though over the years. Because I mean, you think about it, we think of him more as a butterfly swimmer now, don't we?
I think he's still doing the 400 free then, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an evolution from 400 free to, as you say, 100 fly. We would see him as now, and yeah, and obviously the 200 for the relay. All right, so there's those two that we followed their entire career. Now, if we're moving slightly on from Barcelona, if you had to pick one British swimmer who defines the last 10 years, who would you both say?
Petey.
Do you know, it's the man who very nearly swam the 200 breaststroke in Barcelona and missed out by a fingernail. He didn't qualify for the 200 by a smidgen. I often wonder whether his career would have been different if he'd gone to Barcelona doing the 200.
You're exactly right, Adam Peaty. Now, take a listen to this, Bob, from midway through that week.
No, there was one swim today that particularly caught the eye from Adam Peaty.
Yeah, City of Derby, trained by Mel Marshall. Adam really should be on that Barcelona team had he not got his finish so badly wrong and let Michael Jameson in. But he did do a 59.92 in Sheffield in the final of the 17, 18-year-olds 100 breaststroke. So a new personal best for Adam.
So there we go. His first appearance on the podcast in the first week. We were keeping our eye on the national age groups or national ASA Nationals going on at the same time as Worlds, and he popped that 59.92, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And at that point, very few British swimmers had been under 60 seconds too. That's probably what made that so eye-opening.
Yes, indeed. And Casey, he's done everything since.
He's done all right, hasn't he?
Yeah, 2014 was the year he kind of broke out, but he's been pretty successful.
Yeah, so yeah, I'd probably be relatively pleased if I'd had his success.
All right. As I say, we've done this for 10 years. There are a few other things that have stood out from that 10 years, and there was one podcast in particular that I wanted to highlight from actually only a couple of years ago. It was 2020, I think, and I was doing their little series because I'd been doing Pullbuoy for 20 years, and I was speaking to various people about them, my top 20 moments from that 20 years. And one of them had been Steve Parry's bronze in Athens in the 200 fly. And James Goddard had listened to that episode and got in contact, said, I'd like to come and speak to you about my experiences in Athens. And I said, brilliant, because we'd had James as a guest before, and he's really, really great. And he came on, and I thought he was going to come on and we were going to have a nice chat about Athens and his experience where he thought he'd won a medal. He was bumped up to bronze when someone ahead of him was disqualified. It was Pearsall, wasn't it? It was Aaron Pearsall was disqualified and then reinstated and bumped back down, and it didn't make the podium. And it was a really kind of interesting event that doesn't happen a lot. And we started on that, and he just kind of went off on a monologue for ages about that and how it affected him and his mental state afterwards. And it was just a complete shock that had happened, out of nowhere. I don't know, Casey, what you remember about that conversation. Were you as kind of taken aback as I was?
Yeah, I do remember being really, it was pretty amazing that he felt comfortable enough to talk about, how low he'd felt. And I think it was quite shocking to me because he's always such a life and soul of the party guy, such a nice guy to be on teams with, and sort of very welcoming and happy, and the sort of one of the real kind of hearts of the team. And to know that he'd sort of had all that hurt that he'd just been getting on with, I thought it was pretty shocking. And I think I remember asking him if he felt like now he could look back and be proud, and I think he said I don't think he was there yet at that point, which I found really sad. And I think part of that is sort of, anyone who has achieved anything, not even a patch on what he's achieved, which is just huge amounts, but sort of any success at the international level, I just think, wow, that's amazing. And I kind of expect that they think that as well. So it's sort of shocking and sad, but then really, really interesting that it doesn't always work out like that. And, we know that it doesn't work out like that for a lot of people. We're seeing a lot of it at the moment. And I thought it was really important, actually, that he spoke as he did. And it was a really great podcast from him.
It's interesting if you look back at, British swimmers the last 20, 25 years. I think James Goddard is massively underrated.
I'd agree.
Look what he did at the Commonwealth Games in 2002. Didn't expect that from James Goddard, and he flew through right in front of his home crowd and everything else, and all the adrenaline that flew with that. But I actually think, look how long he held that record for in the 200 back. He was an exceptional swimmer. He really was one of our best. I maybe even put it in our top 10 in the last 20 years.
And not just a backstroker as well, like a really, really good IMer. Incredible swimmer.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's what made it so kind of eye-opening. Was he'd been so brilliant, and yet still felt so down on his own achievements. So,
and I can remember, because I commentated on that race in Athens, and I can remember the finish of it. I can remember the disqualification. That he held that bronze for 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. We're all getting really excited because obviously there was only David Davis's bronze, Steve's bronze. We didn't exactly have a plethora of medals there, and there we are going, James Gollard's got a bronze medal, and he had it. It's the old tantalizing, there it is, and then we'll just snatch it away from you. And we knew all the shenanigans that were going on the pool deck as well, and the fact that the Americans, being the Americans, were able to kind of bully the judges downstairs to get that decision overturned. So, had it been any other nation, probably James would have got that third place, but the Americans, being as powerful as they were at that point, were able to kind of muscle their way back onto the podium, and poor old James, who had that medal for less than half an hour, didn't have it anymore.
Yes, not a great episode for him, obviously, and as he shared, had its effect on him. But I'll put a link to that episode in the notes to this podcast, and if you want to go and check it out, highly recommended, because it is a tough listen, but a really good listen. So, do go listen. I think we'll probably draw this conversation to a close. I mean, I think, we've had a bad start in Barcelona. We did pick a bad one to start with, but we've had an awful lot of success, British swimming, over the last 10 years for us to talk about. So it's been more up than down, I would suggest, over those 10 years. It's been great fun sharing that with you. We've had the opportunity to do some amazing things like the London Raw podcast that we did. We've had some great guests. It's been good fun, Bob. 10 years of podcasting. I doubt you thought we'd be doing it for 10 years when we started.
No, I didn't. And the thing is, when we started doing podcasts weren't a big thing, were they? They're not as widespread and as much coveted as they are these days. So it was kind of, you were a bit ahead of the curve on that, to be fair. Steve, you other people have followed in your wake, and there are plenty of others out there now trying to muscle in your territory. But you were kind of ahead of the game in terms of that. And no, I think I'd say there's been certainly more positives in the last 10 years. Didn't look that way in 2013. Rio was good. Tokyo was good. I'm expecting Paris to be good too.
Katie, 10 years of podcasting. You don't like listening to yourself back, but who does? But I doubt you thought you'd be doing it for 10 years either.
No, I'd like to be honest. Until you said it, I hadn't even really realised that it had been 10 years. But I think it's been really. I've liked it personally because I was just coming out of swimming and was in a sort of this is a reason I can still watch my friends, and I think I actually enjoyed the sport so much more, and being that much more removed from it, but kind of seeing people's careers, people I don't know, but like seeing their careers and how they go from being a breakout star to being like a proper, whoa, this person's amazing. It's really fun, and I am a nerd, and I'm quite happy to have fellow nerds to chat to about it. So thank you very much, and sorry for saying the first time I actually met you that you're nowhere near as old or bald as I thought you would be.
That is very true.
Is that me or him?
No. I think I'd assigned a face to Steve for some reason, and it was somebody else's face. I just thought somebody else was Steve. So the first time I met him, that was just what came out of my mouth.
Yes, and yet I still felt able to invite her to be part of this podcast. So there we go. All right. Well, I think that's enough introspection for one episode. But while we are in a retrospective mood, the World Championships in a few weeks, they will be in Fukuoka in Japan. They're returning there. It should have been 20 years after that, but COVID put paid to the exact anniversary. But those championships were in Japan. They were in Fukuoka in 2001. So I thought we'd take a few minutes just to look back at that meet, because it had all sorts of drama and things going on. Britain did pretty well.
Was this the jumping in the pool drama?
Yes, the
one.
4x2.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I've just spoiled your...
That's quite all right. What Katie is alluding to is the drama around the women's 4x200 metres freestyle relay, where Britain won the gold after the two teams who finished ahead of them were disqualified, US for a flyer and Australia for jumping in before the other teams have finished. Now, I made a little film about this with Karen Pickering, one of the protagonists of that relay, a few years ago, which I'll link to in the notes. But if you want to get the in-depth story about what happened, that's the place to start. But yes, that was the gold that Britain won in controversial circumstances. Bob, you were there.
I've not told you the story of that. Who broke the story about us getting the gold?
Go on then.
Me.
Yes,
it was
Bob.
me. Because the reason why it wasn't any great investigative reporting on my part, one of the FINA officials, as it was in those days, FINA, wandered past the commentary box. I happened to know him, and he said, "Congratulations." I said, "On what?" He said, "You got the gold," and walked off. And I went, well, I know I could rely on him, so I told London, and literally it was confirmed about half an hour later. So I think we broke it on 5 Live about half an hour to an hour before it was actually officially announced.
Well, there we go. The scoop from Bob there. But yes, that was quite a dramatic set of circumstances. But it was the gold that Britain won. Britain won 7 medals at that championship. Obviously, that gold was the only gold. But the women also won silver. They tied for silver with the US in the 4x100 free relay, which I always look back and think, did it really happen? But it's there, and no controversy on that.
Great race. No, Graham Smith won a medal in the 800. I think.
Yeah, he got bronze in the 800 and then silver in the 1500. It was the first time he'd broken 15 minutes. I think the British record under 15 minutes for the first time. He came second to an unbelievable world record from Grant Hackett.
And another very quick anecdote on that is that because although I was doing the radio commentary and radio reporting, there was no TV reporter out there in Fukuoka. This shows you how things have changed over 20 odd years. We had a 10-minute window to do the interviews for London. So I had to make sure everybody was in place at that time. We had no overruns. Literally, we had 10 minutes. And Graham won the first of those medals, and he was in drug testing. So I went down the drug testing corridor and dragged him out of drug testing. I wasn't the most popular man.
I'm sure you weren't, but I'm equally, he was probably glad to get out of there while he was waiting.
I was just looking down the results, like so many world records for the men only, like none for the women. But I mean, it's just the age of Ian Thorpe, isn't it? And Grant Hackett, and wow, it's insane. That
was Ian Thorpe's championship. 6 gold medals he won in Fukuoka. That's when, I mean, we knew he was a star from the Sydney Olympics, but 2001 was when he kind of stamped his mark all over the sport, properly.
And a very young Michael Phelps.
Yes, indeed. He won his first gold medal. He won the 200 fly world title then.
Is that his first world record?
Yeah, he would have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing I remember most about Thorpe, I mean, he won the 2, the 4, the 8, and then 3 relay gold medals. But the one of those that always sticks in my memory is the 800 free, when it was him and Grant Hackett. So Hackett obviously more the 1500 swimmer, Thorpe more the 200 swimmer, and they were kind of meeting not quite in the middle, but in middle ground. And Hackett just went hell for leather from the start, just trying to get rid of Ian Thorpe, and he couldn't do it. And they turned a metre or two. He had a metre or two's lead at 700 metres, and Thorpe just came back in some ludicrous split and won by about 10 metres or something. And it was just amazing. And then it took, I don't know when it was. I think it must have been, I'm going to say, possibly 2007, maybe, I don't know. But when Hackett finally got that record back, he had to be about 6 seconds under the split at 700 meters to be able to hang on enough, because Thorpe just had such a thick finishing burst, and that one really sticks in the memory from me for 2001. Apart from obviously the the relay controversy, but just the other medals: Joe Fargus, bronze in the 200 back. Zoe Baker.
Was she still British then?
And she was British. This was British for another couple of years before she went off to New Zealand in 2005.
She was Australia, wasn't she?
No.
You're thinking about Zoe.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Yeah, no, Joe. Yes, Joe went off to Australia. Yeah, that's right. But Zoe went off to New Zealand, didn't she, in 2005?
Yeah.
And then Mark Foster, he was probably only about, I don't know, 30 or something. Maybe a bit older.
The early years of his career.
Exactly, yeah. Took bronze in the 55.
I think he was he not in lane 8 or something for that final? Either lane 1 or lane 8. Because I think he was at the extremities of the pool. He wasn't in the centre of the pool. I think he was in one of the outside lanes.
Yeah, quite possibly. So, so 7 medals. So actually quite successful for Britain. I mean, I think that was not quite the best, but second best championships they'd ever had. And then obviously 2 years later in 2003, it was the most successful they'd ever had when they got 8 medals. But
good after a disappointing Olympics, I think. Like it's a good comeback after Sydney, isn't it?
No medals at the Olympics. Yes, the worst ever Olympics.
But I mean, I think we kind of forget about that championship. 7 medals is not, it was a big aberration, if you like, at the time.
Yeah.
In terms of Britain's historic norm, and indeed until recent years, it would
First
still
one with
be
Bill
up there,
Sweetenham as well, too. First one with Bill Sweetenham, that was.
Yeah, so that was Bill Sweetenham's first championships. But it was remarkably good as Britain goes.
Well, let's hope that this next visit to Fukuoka is. I don't know if we'll be on 7 medals. I'm sure we'll talk about that near the time. But it would be nice if we could.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
Have another success story.
All right, well, I think that's time to draw things to a close. As Katie's alluded to, the Fukuoka World Championships are coming up in a few weeks, and the next time you'll hear from us, we'll be previewing that competition. Looking forward to hopefully 7 British medals, or maybe a few different, but 7 would be nice, wouldn't it? But we'll run the rule over all of that stuff in our next episode. Until we're back then, it only remains for me to say thank you for 10 years of nattering about swimming. It's been great fun. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you for asking us. I still don't really know how that happened, but still.
It's all good. It worked out for the best. So we'll be back, as I say, on the next episode to preview the World Championships. In the meantime, I'll put the links in the notes to this episode for those couple of things we've talked about on this edition. If you want to get in contact, you can find me as ever on Twitter at Pullbuoy, or on Instagram at PullbuoyUK, or you can go to pullbuoy.co.uk/contact. And if you've enjoyed what we've done over these last 10 years, do leave us a review on Spotify or Apple. We'd really appreciate it. But until we're back with you, thanks for listening.